Hi, everyone. This is Nelson with Aquarist Assembled. Aquarist Assembled is brought to you by Creekwood Aquatics. Creekwood Aquatics, a better class of nutrition. Creekwood Aquatics is a small aquaculture company based out of Floresville, Texas, where we specialize in Daphnia magna, phytoplanktons, and now tiggerpods. Joining me is Rose and Jessica from Ethical Axolotls. Is that right?
Ethical Axolotls and the American Axolotl Organization, and Jessica also
Okay.
has Hiko's Treasures.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
with
So I'll
Hika's
let you guys.
Treasures.
All right. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. I'll start with Rose, and then we'll move on to Jessica. Okay. So introduce yourself to everybody.
That's good. So my name is Rose. I'm from Alaska. I own Ethical Axolotls Rescue Services, and I co-founded the American Axolotl Organization with Jessica and Milo back in, I want to say January 2023, somewhere around that. So we're coming up on a year. And we have been, well, I have been caring for axolotls since about, I want to say for about 3 years now. It's all blurring together, honestly. So I love these guys. And it was just a one day, oops, guess what? Interesting animal caught my eye. And now I'm the axolotl dude in my friend group. And that's who I am now. I can't talk about myself without talking about axolotls.
It's good. And Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm with Hika's Treasures. I'm a breeder and also a rescuer. I am based in Washington, but moving to Illinois in the next couple months soon. I've been caring for axolotls since February of 2021, and I got into them because of my 25th birthday. My parents took me to the Vancouver Aquarium in British Columbia, Canada, and they had axolotls, and I was like, oh my god, they're so cool. And so I found out that you can actually have them as pets. So I came home, I told my parents about it, and I got an axolotl later that year. And now I have 3.
It's very cute. My first experience with axolotls was back in New Jersey. It's around like 1998 or 1999. And I
Mhm.
walked into a PetSmart and they had them listed as water puppies. And I was so confused. I didn't have any idea what I was looking at. Um, I remember later on in the 2000s, I went back to PetSmart to see if I could purchase one of these weird little water puppies that I remember seeing back in the day, but they were all gone. They were all gone.
Mhm.
And I asked one of the people I was working with at the time, and they're like, "Oh, those are illegal." So, unfortunately, when I was living in New Jersey, I did not have access to any type of axolotl or tiger salamander. It wasn't until I moved to Texas and I was working at my current job, and some axolotls became available, and I adopted them. So I had 4 axolotls living in my house, and I downsized to 2 because it is a lot of work. Axolotls are a lot of work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Axolotls were my first aquatic pet ever, so it was a lot like getting into them.
Although they weren't my
And
first
for
aquatic pet, oh, although they weren't my first aquatic pet, they were my first successful aquatic pet, my first time learning about the nitrogen cycle and everything. And so that was a very big culture shock for me, understanding that, hey, these are animals that, just like dogs and cats, high care, they have high care needs. And I was just a teenager at that time that was going through the fish stage, the stage to that stage when everyone's getting their fish and putting them in a bowl. And I
yeah,
broke past that and then moved into axolotls. And then here I am trying to move into something greater, hoping that I can prevent that fishbowl stage from having to happen to everyone else.
Yeah, education is very important. So let me start off again with my first question. And you mentioned this before, but tell us about what brought you into the hobby. I know the axolotls brought you into the hobby, but like, what was that? Was there any experience before that that sparked your interest in aquatic animals?
Um, Unfortunately for me, it was so random and so out of the out of the blue. I was just thinking one day, what would be the strangest, most interesting hyperfixation for me to get? For me to just I was looking for something to get into, looking for something new to try, and I had some fish and they weren't doing so well, and I was thinking I need to do better for them. And what usually gets me interested in the current project is by adding something new to the project. So I found axolotls, and that ended up being my wake up point with instead of fish being a decoration, they became this amazing I I almost call them an ecosystem, but that's a way to call them. Well, anyways, fish, axolotls, they're amazing creatures and they're actual organisms in their own right. So they're anyway, that was it for me. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was just a little moment for me.
Nice.
And I think Jessica
And how
talked
about
about hers,
you,
didn't she?
Jessica? Yeah.
So I remember in high school, I loved marine biology. Like my favorite animal is a cuttlefish. I've always loved just marine animals. I always think that they're super interesting, but I've never actually owned an aquarium or anything like that until I got my axolotl a couple years ago.
You, you know, what attracts me to them is that they just have like this blank expression on their face, like at all times. So when I'm sitting in my living room or we're sitting in the little armchair next to them, and I just kind of look over, they're just like, "Ugh." I'm just like, oh my god, they're so cute. They don't do anything all day, they don't move, but they're so cute. All right. Other than axolotls, is there any fish that you're particularly like interested in? Is there any other than
I really love crawdads. I, they have such unique personalities. Although I know they're not quite fish, but they're they count. So I love them to death. So they're one of my top favorites. But besides that, I love
and you,
axolotls.
Jessica? Of course
I
I
really love fire eels. I think they're really interesting. I had one probably about a year ago, and I really want to get another one. They're so cool.
Oh yeah. My next question is: what is the most valuable piece of information or advice you would give to anyone who's considering on getting an axolotl?
Um, for me, it's whenever you're thinking about how difficult an axolotl is, it's always about what you don't mess up on, not about or rather what you don't actively put into the tank with them. So if you keep them in their little bubble and you don't actively toss a fish in there, toss gravel in there, and you just let them vibe, they they maintain really well. It's all about the setup, is what I'm trying to say.
And Jessica, what is your advice for anyone who's considering on
Mhm.
getting an axolotl?
The first thing that comes to mind is doing research and knowing knowledge about the nitrogen cycle, because I've met a lot of new people getting to axolotls that know nothing about the nitrogen cycle, didn't even know it was a thing.
Mhm.
So that would be like my number one thing before even considering getting any, aquatic animal, not just axolotls.
Definitely.
my piece of advice is going to come from my experience when I first brought the axolotls home. Um, I set up the aquarium. I had an existing aquarium, and I moved all the fish that were living in there. I moved them throughout the house, and I popped the 4 axolotls in there after I acclimated them, and they sank to the bottom, and I was so happy, and I was just staring at them, and then I watched one just suck up a piece of gravel, and I was like, that is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So I had to get all the axolotls out of there, and it's like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm draining all the water, and I'm scooping all the gravel, and there's muck everywhere, and I was like, this was a big mistake. And I got all the gravel out, put my little decorations back in, turned the filtration on, and then I had each axolotl sitting in a bucket, and I didn't put them back into the tank until I watched them regurgitate the piece of gravel. So if you're gonna put them in an enclosure, make sure the gravel doesn't fit in their mouth.
Yes. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I guess that's the best way to say what I was trying to say.
Oh, that was a long night for me.
Yes, that's exactly that with gravel, with the nitrogen cycle. If I could talk for a sec, all about their care. If you research their care and you understand what you're getting into, you will almost never have a problem so long as you have a good $100-$200 set aside to take them to the vet if you have issues. In that case, you will never have any sort of issues with your axolotl. If you don't do your research beforehand, if you don't know not to put them on gravel, if you don't know not to cohabitate with them with fish, if you don't know about their diet, then it's a recipe for disaster, because then it's one thing after another. And like you said, like Jessica said, it's all about really understanding the little things that they need specifically and preventing them from becoming an issue in the first place. But I rambled enough.
So yeah. So you mentioned diet. So what would be your preferred diet for axolotls?
So I'll talk about, there's a distinction for anything 3 inches plus. That is almost solely earthworms. That is what we consider an axolotl must be sold to the general public. No axolotl would be sold to anyone that is below the age of 3 months old or below 3 inches old or doesn't have its back legs yet. And those standards all combine to mean that it would be eating chopped earthworms, which are easily accessible, and they're the best diet for them. They're very high in calcium, and their calcium to phosphorus ratio, very high protein, low in fat, and overall just great food for them. And they have no exoskeleton, so no infection risk either. But
That's very interesting. I never took that into consideration.
if you're working with younger axolotls, they clearly can't eat earthworms. They're much smaller than the earthworms are. That is when you need to feed them microcrustaceans. And in that case, it is absolutely imperative to have a source of microworms, micro crustaceans, and something that you can readily feed to your axolotls live, because they cannot eat freeze-dried food. They cannot eat frozen food very frequently. And if you're trying to raise hatchlings, if you're trying to raise juveniles, you honestly need live food that can stay alive in the freshwater ecosystem.
Yeah, I talked to a bunch of people when I went to a convention in Houston. I went to the Aquarium Nation event, and one of the guys we were talking about, I was talking about my blackworm culture that I was trying to start, and it keeps failing. And he was like, things are going to get harder because ever since COVID, like there was a disruption in supply chains, so blackworms got really hard to come by, and blackworms was one of the things that they they did, not only for axolotls but for most amphibians. And when that supply chain dried up, now they have to start looking into things like baby brine shrimp. Uh, I I started producing Daphnia back in 2023, and I noticed that there was a huge influx of people who were breeding axolotls who were asking me for Daphnia and for a constant supply of Daphnia because
Hmm.
when you breed these things, they have like what 200, 300 babies at a time, and yeah, yeah. I thought about breeding axolotls at one point, and I talked to a few people, and they told me all the care that goes into it. And I was like, you know what, I don't have time. I'm trying to work a full time job. um, I got my family to take care of. I got this side business going on. I said I don't have time to raise a million axolotl babies.
Hey, Jessica, what's the
Yeah.
most eggs you've ever heard of any axolotl laying?
I
I think we're
want to
thinking of the same
say,
number.
I think I've heard up to 1,300 before.
Whoa!
I think I've heard of 1,600.
Really? Wow.
Yep. So it's something. It's something all the way up there, and it's not anything that you want to handle.
No, the gentleman I was talking to earlier today, because I went to another swap meet, he was saying that when he breeds his axolotls and he has to remove the eggs, he says these things are so slimy. He goes, they're disgusting. He goes, they're just a big slime ball.
Yeah.
But he's like, even when you're trying to scoop them up with the net, they just clog up the net, so the net's just full of water. He goes, it's a mess. He goes, it's not anything you want to get involved with. If you don't have to, or
Nope.
if you don't have the passion to do it, just stay away from it.
Yeah, honestly.
Uh,
But I'm sorry, I'm just envisioning that, and that's such a funny thought.
so,
Do you have any other
do you guys
questions
have
for
any,
us?
do you guys have any funny aquarium related stories? Any funny axolotl related
I sure
stories?
do.
Yeah,
By funny, do you mean disastrous? Because I have a couple of disastrous stories.
I'll take disastrous too.
Do you want to go
All right,
first,
so
Rose?
Sure, yeah, I will. So my beloved Pookie. Pookie is my girl I raised from an egg, and she's now presumed female, so she's been hanging out in the girls' sink. And she had been kind of hanging out at the top of the water, and I went over on January 9th. I went over and I poked her foot with my finger, and she flipped around and bit my finger. Like she leapt up like a salmon would and bit my finger. Now, should I have been sticking my hands in the aquarium? No, that was on me. She still bit my finger, and I jerked my hand back, screamed like a little girl. But she fell behind the aquarium when I did that, the 60-gallon aquarium. And so Jessica was on the phone with me. I was panicking, thinking, oh my God, did I just kill my baby? Did I just lose my baby behind the 60-gallon aquarium? Because it's bolted to the wall. So I am squeezing behind it, and I actually dislocate my shoulder in the process of getting this axolotl out. Pookie is fine. Pookie actually crawls into my hand. With her one brain cell, she manages to crawl into my hand. And I pull her out, get her in some medications, and she's perfectly fine. She's proud of herself, in fact. Um, and I'm in physical therapy. I've dislocated my shoulder twice since then. Um, I've learned my lesson not to stick my fingers in the aquarium, though.
the things we do for love.
Yep.
Yeah, my story is kind of similar, and my story happened before Rose's did. So whenever this happened, I was like, okay, I know what to do because this just happened like a month ago. So, I have a leucistic axolotl that I named Bucket, and I took Bucket to the vet and noticed he was just like super red. I pretty sure what ended up being ammonia burns due to like pH issues. and they diagnosed him with having like bacterial infection, and so I was tubbing him and giving him medication for his bacterial infection. And while I was giving his medication by injecting his left shoulder, and I was holding him, like I was doing all of this by myself. And when I was doing it, he kind of slipped out of my hands. I was wearing gloves. He slipped out of my hands, fell behind my dresser. And my dresser is a 70-inch like wooden dresser, so I would not be able to move it even if I tried. Like not even a budge. And so instantly I literally screamed, "Bucket, no!" And then I ran across the street to get my neighbors. And so luckily they were able to help me. They came over, and whenever they came into my room, I literally saw Bucket crawling from underneath my dresser. And my neighbor, she was like, "Is that your fish?" I was like, "Yes, that is."
Yeah, so if there was like this collective pool of brain cells that they all pull from, he must have had all of them that day. Because he
Yes.
managed to, he decided to crawl his butt on out of that dresser, and oh my gosh.
Yeah, just because of how heavy the dresser was, if he didn't do that, I'm pretty sure he would have died that day.
Mhm.
Man, like sometimes when I look at animals, I don't understand how they survive in nature. Um, like again, the axolotls. Uh, I have a video where I'm feeding everybody, feeding everyone earthworms. Right, this is something we've been doing for a while, And just one day, just one of them wasn't getting it. Like I gave him the worm, and he kept striking, and he kept missing the worm, and I was like, "Bro, what? We do this every week." And eventually, he just got tired and just swam away, and I was like, "Bro." um, like me and my wife, we have pugs. I'm like, I don't think you guys are meant for the wild. I look at
Yeah,
my pug. I
absolutely
always
not.
say,
I actually know a lot of fun facts
just because.
about the. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I'm just saying. When I look at my pug, I just think about how they used to be majestic wolves, and now they're pugs.
I know a lot of fun facts about these guys in the wild. These guys actually lived in somewhat of a bubble in the wild. Um, Lakes Xochimilco and Chalco were very fascinating areas of nature. The substrate, it wasn't really a sand, it was more of a clay silt kind of such a fine grained substrate that they actually could not ingest it. Or if they did ingest it, it would just pass right through them like the finest sand out there, riverbed sand. So they never had to deal with eating grapple. It was just this fine little. Yep, exactly. And there were about 3 species of fish, or 6 species of fish from 3 different families, I want to say, until humans introduced carp and tilapia that went and ate all the axolotls. And
Yeah.
the temperature of the lakes maintained at a perfect below 72 degrees until, some climate stuff happened. And, it was just this perfect little bubble. So axolotls are actually very fragile creatures.
Yeah, like
But
here at the house, we run our AC all the time, so my tank is always, upper 60s, but it's still cooler. But I
Mhm.
have seen nightmare scenarios where people put their axolotls in like regular tropical style aquariums, and then they
Yeah,
start to
absolutely.
morph out, and they turn into this weird salamander, and it's just like the roughest time for them because they're one of those animals that just perpetually stays in what would we call that stage of their
Larva
Oh,
life?
stage.
neotenic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they just stay in that stage for the rest of their lives. And they reproduce and they do all their normal biological functions. It's just weird how they just like hit this like little form and they just stayed in it. And
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
that's always like interests me, but I think that's
It's
one of the biggest.
essentially
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it's
crazy, but
essentially because they didn't have to go any farther. every other amphibian had to learn how to evolve past the state of a quote-unquote fish, but axolotls didn't because they had that precious bubble to live in.
Yeah, they said the most upsetting thing I see when it comes to axolotls is when I go into a regular fish shop. And again, these are tropical fish shop, and they're
Mhm.
warmer. They're 78, 80, 82 degrees sometimes. And you'll see these axolotls in like a 10-gallon fish tank, and they just freeze like a water bottle and they put it on top of the water. I'm like, if you can't maintain the proper environment for this thing, why are we going to sell it? Um, and then again, for most people, like, are you going to be able to provide a cool enough environment for this axolotl to live in its whole life? Um, I think those are important questions people should ask themselves when they do plan on picking up, one of these animals. But like I said, for me, I know that I run my house cooler because I have my reef tank and I have a bunch of other stuff, and it's cheaper for me to cool my entire house than it is to buy chillers and put heaters and all this stuff everywhere. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I personally, when I'm selling axolotls, I vet each of my buyers. I ask them if they have a cycled aquarium. They say yes. They always say yes. I said, okay, how did you cycle it? And they say, what do you mean? We cycled it. And we have that little argument each time. And it usually loses me some sales. But I wait until they tell me that they cycled it with ammonia and or used a seeded media. And if they won't tell me that, I won't make them the sale.
I am so happy you said that right now, because I've been in this hobby for over 20 years. And one of my first introduction to fish keeping was a top fin VHS that came with this tank setup. And they always talked about how you start the tank, you run the filter, and you wait a week, and then you go to PetSmart and you can buy all the fish you want. Um,
Mm,
I've gotten to the argument with multiple people saying the cycle doesn't start until you add an ammonia-based waste and you have the right nitrifying bacteria to break down that ammonia-based waste. So your cycle doesn't start until you introduce those two things.
exactly. And it's so easy to argue with that all day, especially when, you hate to say it, but it does seem to be a money-making venture for some of these companies.
Oh, absolutely. They're just these cute little adorable little jelly bean things that people want in their house.
Hmm. So, yeah, but that's what we're all about. We're wanting to sell these animals to excellent homes that will make sure that they live their appropriate 10 to 20 years in life expectancy. And we want to make sure that humans are being as educated about axolotls as axolotls are receiving good homes because we care about the humans too. We think, or at least I think. I care about the axolotls a lot.
People 50-50.
Yeah, 50/50.
So if people wanted to learn more about your organization, where would they go?
The best place to go would be the American, or excuse me, let me pull up that would be the American Axolotl Organization, which is axolotlorganization.com.
And on this website, what type of information are they going to find on this website?
On the website, that has an axolotl care guide, an axolotl cycling guide. Well, it's a nitrogen cycle guide, but it's tailored to the bioload of an axolotl. It has a few supply lists, and we're eventually going to have a few recommended breeder lists and a few other things that will help guide you in the axolotl process. And it does also link to a few additional communities. So
That
let
is
me pull up
excellent.
that link. Now that is axolotlorganization.com.
And Jessica's website, you guys share the same website, or does Jessica have her own
Yes,
special
we work
website?
together.
All right.
That is for the American Axolotl Organization, and eventually we're working out our own websites, but
Yeah, there's a still a work in progress right now.
Trust me. Even with my own website, like I think I'm always done with it, and then I'm like, oh wow, I have still a lot of things to do.
Yeah,
All
website
right.
hosting costs money.
Well, it's been great talking to you guys. Unless you guys have any other questions, I think we're good.
Not that I can think of. I've had a lot of fun.
No problem.
So,
All right.
yeah, thank you so
I'm
much.